some of the most beautiful places in the world, such as Mount Fuji and the Takachiho Gorge in Miyazaki, Japan, is a must-see destination for those wishing to travel.
Japan is beautiful.
But it is also home to many strange and terrifying stories.
You got the legless woman Tiki and the 8-foot-tall woman.
Japan is renowned not only for its beauty, but also for the horrifying urban legends told by its populace. These stories transcend simply being scary and live in the mind long after.
Japanese horror fans know that curses play a big part of their myths and legends.
Japan, January 31st, 1998. Film director Hideo Nakata releases the modestly budgeted horror film Ringu, and, to the surprise of everyone, the film becomes a mega hit. Soon after, mainstream Hollywood begins its jump on the bandwagon with their version of the film, The Ring. Hollywood begins its J-horror run, remaking movie after movie. But what, in the eyes of so many, makes J-horror so much better than the average scary movie?
Fear is universal. Unlike comedy or drama, which is vastly culture-based. And this makes J-horror, on the surface, easier to translate. It's the switch around in the writing that makes J-horror way more interesting and scary. US movies feel the need to attach logic or morality to their stories. And Japanese horror doesn't always do that. US movies feel the need to attach logic or morality to their stories. Japanese horror doesn't always have a happy ending.
But just where do J-horror and J-horror ideals come from? What makes it feel so unique in a world of scary stories across all cultures? For the West, the jump scare is traditional in horror films. You scream, you laugh, you move on. Japanese audiences prefer the scary type of film that affects them psychologically, such as Kuchisake-onna.
The slit-mouthed woman is an urban legend from the 1970s, I think. She wears a mask and asks random people if they think she's pretty.
She asks if she's pretty, then removes her mask, showing a horribly slit mouth ear to ear. If you get scared or scream, she attacks with scissors or knives. Even schools at the time were warning kids about this vengeful woman or ghost. This was a big thing for a time. A lot of people were terrified if they happened to see anyone with a mask.
Despite the widespread fear of Kuchisake-onna, there are no confirmed reports of anyone actually being attacked by this spirit. And yet, this story persists. Many believe this legend to be a cautionary tale, be good to people. But others believe the spirit of the slit-mouthed woman can never find peace and will forever be cursed by her own fear and anger. Kuchisake-onna is always found in heavily populated areas, targeting strangers, much the opposite of Hachishakusama, the 8-foot-tall woman. Preying on children, Hachishakusama is a beautiful woman with long black hair, usually wearing a white kimono, to instill trust within the young. The 8-foot-tall woman lures in her victims and snatches them with arms that can grow to impossible lengths. This woman targets lone children who venture too far away and often finds her victims near forests and secluded locations. Variations of this urban legend have made their way into various forms of literature and movies, and the results are always the same: a horrific journey.
Sometimes the 8-foot-tall woman will scare her captured kids for days before killing them. Other times, she curses them by turning them into another version of whatever she is.
The legend of Hachishakusama is often used as a cautionary tale to warn children not to talk to strangers or wander too far from home. In modern times, it is often used to explain the disappearances of children in rural areas and has become a popular part of Japanese folklore. The origins of the 8-foot-tall woman are not clear, but perhaps that adds the mystery needed to keep this urban legend powerfully circulating all this time.
The 8-foot-tall woman legend has always freaked me out, but not as much as the Red Room Curse.
The Red Room Curse is another of those stories not known so much in the West. But if you love horror movies, you've seen variations. The film Pulse is one of them. Would you like to meet a ghost?
The film Pulse begins by asking those surfing the internet if they would like to meet a ghost. Eventually, the victims in this supernatural film seemingly commit suicide, and the contagion spreads. For many, Pulse works well as a scary movie because it taps into so much more than your typical supernatural film. Loneliness, depression, and isolation all play a part in the fear that Pulse creates and intensifies, and it plays on all those emotions before it truly takes its paranormal turn.
The film poses a nod to the growing crisis in Japan, social withdrawal. Teens would become reclusive, sometimes not leaving the house for months or even years.
Hikikomori, or social withdrawal, is seemingly a major theme in movies like Pulse, and is in fact an ongoing issue not just in Japan, but around the world. But the similarities of such stories and films to the Red Room Curse should not be ignored. It's also worth noting that the Red Room Curse predates movies such as Pulse.
The Red Room Curse is a Japanese internet legend about a red papa bat that first shows a list of everyone it has killed. And then it kills the person who sees it!
But just how is it that the Red Room Curse kills its victims? How does this early, scary story involving the internet actually work and spread?
A pop-up ad appears asking if you like the Red Room over and over. If you try and close it, it just pops back up again. Eventually, you see a list of past victims and sense something behind you. You pass out, and you die.
If you are a victim of this curse, the room that you're found in is mysteriously painted in red blood. There are also variations on this urban legend, such as a small crack forming on the victim's body and getting larger and larger until the victim splits into pieces.
But could there really be something more to many of these Japanese myths, stories, and ghostly encounters? Perhaps the idea of a moral compass or supernatural influence?
Japanese horror is often driven by revenge, or, even scarier, for no reason at all. What makes J-horror so scary is that there's no real way for a hero to win. There's no happy ending. Even if the hero figures out the ghost, it ends up not mattering at all.
Fans of J-horror will tell you The really good stuff uses the idea that less is more. It's all about atmosphere. There's gore, but it's the vibe that makes things scary. It's really hard to explain, but Japanese horror is scary as hell.
Could it be that what makes J-horror so scary is the futility of the featured victim, the wanted outcomes and unanswered questions? Perhaps the realization that no matter what the protagonist does, they are doomed? But what about the more surreal and paranormal elements? Are Japanese ghost stories simply better than those from the West? Japan, 1919. Saijo Yaso composes a poem chronicling one man's journey through hell itself. To this day, nobody has been able to grasp the overarching theme of the poem, or even what could have inspired it. If you read the poem out loud, you wind up dead. This urban legend has been floating around the internet since the early 2000s, and there are, in fact, a handful of deaths attributed to the reading of this poem. In 2004, Japanese author Yamota Inuhiko gave this urban legend a new lease on life by stating that if you by chance happen to read Tomino's Hell out loud, you will suffer a terrible fate. Due to inaccurate translations of Tomino's Hell, there are several versions floating around the internet, but only the original, accurate version is said to be cursed. Yet questions remain regarding the original poem. Why is Tomino in hell? One thing believed is that if you are reading an English translation, it's probably been significantly altered.
The poem was written in 1919. Odds are, it's a metaphor for war. World War I had just ended. Tomino's hell, war is hell. There are more than a few statements in the poem that support this theory. The fire and blood from the sisters' mouths are fierce encouragement of Tomino to fight. I don't know about the supernatural elements of this story, or why people can't figure out the meaning. But for me, I believe it's pretty clear the poem is about war, and anything that seems off is just because of the translations. There's no ghost story or curse here, at least in my opinion.
But for those who believe, Tomino's Hell is a curse that is definitely not unique. Stories of cursed words and even objects have a long history.
Nationwide, cursed objects make for some scary stories. Books, paintings, video, they can all be cursed. Black magic, vengeful ghosts, demons, they can all be attached to words or objects.
In 1991, author Koji Suzuki releases his book Ring, which later gets picked up for what ends up being multiple movie adaptations. The story, involving a cursed video cassette tape, becomes a mega horror hit, kicking off a massive J-horror phase in Hollywood.
Another common thread found in a lot of Japanese ghost stories is technology. Something technology related either activates a curse or helps during the investigation. A cursed video, cursed camera, or even the internet. J-horror is the ultimate watch out for technology anecdote. And by God, it works.
Stories such as Ringu and Pulse are creepy reminders that as good as technology gets, there is always a potential downside. J-horror capitalizes on our fascination with tech and the familiarity that comes with it as a method of subversion. Ghosts emerge from and are often directly tied to household technology, thus introducing an everyday fear into something as simple as static on TV.
Characters in J-horror usually have bad family relationships. In The Ring and The Grudge, the monster is created by death of a family member caused by dysfunction.
Japanese horror doesn't just rely on familiarity and a troubled family tree to deliver its uneasy anecdotes. It also relies on its unnatural depictions of its ghosts and things that go bump in the night. From unnaturally shuddering and shifting forms to contorted and backwards creatures, adds to the unique way its ghosts are impossibly presented, and only adds to the eerie visuals of J-horror.
What sets Japanese horror apart from more Western horror isn't that it primarily deals with ghosts, but how it depicts those ghosts, and the psychological elements that come with that. The primary goal is to scare through psychological means. A vengeful spirit tied to an everyday object.
But then you also have things like the cow head legends. They say you hear the cow head story and you get increasingly scared for days until you literally tremble to death. And if you only read a portion of the story, it doesn't kill you, but you still be scared and suffer greatly.
Although many Japanese horror stories are completely fictional, there are many that are at least partly based on real occurrences.
The Howling Tunnel going into Inunaki Village is an interesting one.
Many ask if the village itself is, or ever was, real. It is said to be somewhere in the Unaki countryside.
The stories say all who enter this lawless village are doomed to a violent death.
But the tunnel legend itself is almost a completely separate urban legend that only connects with the cursed village. The tunnel is said to regularly emanate from the sounds of barking dogs or screams. This legend is likely inspired by a brutal murder that actually took place in the Inunaki Tunnel in 1988. A group of teens kidnapped, robbed, and tortured a 20-year-old man and then burned him alive deep within the tunnel. Shortly after, the Howling Tunnel legend spread. Another famous legend is that of Akamanto. This supernatural entity meets victims when they are most vulnerable on the toilet. He wears a white mask and a long red cape. This spirit always asks the victim to choose a color, red or blue. Both answers get you killed.
No matter how you answer the question, you're going to die horribly. Choosing red means you are stabbed, spilling your red blood all over the stall. If you answered blue, it either suffocates you or sucks out your blood, leaving you blue-faced and dead on the floor. Answering any other color means you are taken to hell.
The only real way to escape the red cloak, don't answer at all. Get out of there as quick as you can. Ignore the spirit, get out of the bathroom, and you may survive.
The red cloak spirit is said to haunt the last stall in school and public bathrooms. This legend is said to originate around 1935 and quickly spread. It's said an old homeless man in a cloak would break in and sleep in bathroom stalls. Thus, the red cloak myth was born and slowly altered to what it is now. The added supernatural elements really helped this one spread.
For many, Japanese horror stories and the urban legends they are based on have always been vastly superior to the westernized version of the horror genre. And many also believe that the supernatural elements of J-horror falls more closely to the real stories than completely fictionalized myths. Could elements of truth and real-life events be the secret sauce that makes Japanese horror so much more effective? Perhaps, but for many, it's the cultural differences that make J-horror so effective, along with the more psychological elements that trump our Hollywood favorites.